You may have noticed that our American friends had an election yesterday. So I thought what I'd try to do is I was looking for something sort of America themed just to talk about. And as luck would have it, I am both a member of the Society of English and American Lawyers, but also the Middle Temple. And the Middle Temple has quite a connection with the US. So I thought, you always like this sort of like legal trivia. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background there. So this is one for the law and history nerds, really. First of all, what's Middle Temple? Just for people who aren't quite sure. Middle Temple is one of the 4 Inns of Court. The Inns of Court date back to, well, we've got no idea. They're either 800 and 900 years old or whatever. And they started out effectively as almost like livery companies, guilds. But they still exist today. And they have the exclusive right to call people to the bar. Before you become a barrister, you have to be called to the bar, and you can only be called by one of the Inns of Court. I mean, we used to have like the Inns of Chancery and all sorts of things that, provided legal education. And back in those days, the way they did legal education, because the bar never used to be a graduate profession. It's only been a graduate profession relatively recently. And we're on about going back to it and just having apprenticeships. But it used to be you just applied to join the inn and you just sort of tagged along with all the other lawyers. And you sort of learned by osmosis, really, just chatting to people. I mean, now they actually teach the bar course at a number of universities. I think there's about 11. But when I did it, you just went to the Inns of Court School of Law. And yes, there were sort of like lectures and exams and things like that. But a lot of the time, you would just go to your inn. And you did a thing called dining. I had to do 18 dinners where you are forced to go and sit with people. You sit in little groups of 4 people and you're not allowed to talk to anybody outside that group. But the idea is you just randomly sit next to somebody like another barrister or a judge, and you just sort of start chatting and, like tell us about the job, what do I need to know, and all that sort of thing. I mean, it really was, it was sort of like a very informal way of learning. So that's how the inns themselves work. But now let me go on about the American side of things. And again, once again, just to say, cheers for all the really sweet comments about the Ramsay Hunt thing. I mean, I'm hoping I'm making a bit more sense. I mean, the irony is I only start to get normal towards the end of the day when I've been in the pub. But I thought, it was that flip side. It's like, well, if I go and have a couple of pints, my face starts working, but then I forget what I'm talking about. I mean, but you know the standards of this channel anyway. But anyway, the inns. I've got some notes as well, unusually for me, because there's lots of dates to remember and stuff. But the Middle Temple's connection with America goes back a long way. You may have heard of some people called Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh. They went off exploring America. Well, they were both actually members of Middle Temple. And interestingly, when you are called to the bar, you sign a book. And when I did it at Middle Temple, there's a table that is actually the hatch cover from the Golden Hind, and that's used as the table where you sign the book. I mean, the funny thing is, despite being this amazingly interesting historical artefact, the rest of the time it is literally just used as a table. I went in there once at lunchtime because they've got like a canteen type thing in the hall, and they actually had the table there with the till on it. Hey, respect those traditions. There was another guy, because they set up like this thing called the Virginia Company to explore, and they actually had all the meetings at Middle Temple. I mean, loads of Middle Templars were involved. And there's a guy called Philip Amadas. He commanded the expedition to Roanoke, and we all know how well, you might not know how well that turned out. Google it, it's very, very interesting. The irony is he set off on this like worldwide voyage, and when he got back to the inn, they fined him 20 shillings because of his absence from the inn. That's what the sort of thing we do. But also, we started to attract people from the colonies because, at the time it was pretty much regarded as England. I mean, I won't get into the revolution. Well, actually, I'm about to do in a minute. But, a lot of they very much thought of themselves as English people. So they would return back to the old country to study law. And for some reason, they all came to Middle Temple. And that seems to be the start of our association with the US. Now, obviously, as things started kicking off there, and I've just got to find my fantastic notes. There was a guy called, I'm just going to, I'll just do one of my unusual edits here while I try and find my notes. Oh yeah, actually I don't need to. There's a guy called John Dickinson, and he was admitted to the inn in 1753. And he was a bit of a rabble-rouser, and he started agitating for American independence and writing lots of pamphlets and leaflets about it. And he came up with a phrase, no taxation without representation. I wonder if that ever caught on. But actually, you know, Middle Templars were very, very involved. And actually, it was Middle Templars who drafted the Declaration of Independence. And of the 55 people who ended up signing it, 5 people who signed it were actually members of the inn at the time. And at Middle Temple, we actually have our own copy of the Declaration of Independence. It's rather weird how it came, because there isn't really an original Declaration of Independence, because at the time they had to get copies to all the relevant people, and the copying process destroyed the original. So they made various like original facsimiles of it, and at Middle Temple we actually have one. It's just on the stairs. I'll try and put a photograph of it, because I took it. The trouble is it's somewhere where it really reflects. So I'll try and I'll try and find a decent photograph of it. But yeah, Middle Templars were very, very involved, you know, in the revolutionary side of things. But, you know, being lawyers, you know how we don't like to take sides. There are also lots of Middle Templars on the other side, including one guy, John Lawrence. He actually was considered to be, you know, he was one of the generals, and he was considered to be not a very good one. That's probably not much. Let's have a look. Oh, here we go. Here's a bit of a note for you that I'm just going to plagiarise from a book, actually, that I've written out. The inn was well represented on the other side of the revolutionary struggle, militarily and otherwise. Sir Banastre Tarleton, what a great name, admitted to the inn in the early 1770s, was one of the most prominent and hated British commanders during the war, becoming known for the alleged atrocities of his men. A notable American loyalist Middle Templar was William Franklin, son of the more famous Benjamin Franklin. Remember him, you know, kites and keys and out in lightning storms. And he was admitted in the early 1750s, and while a student, had a son called William Temple Franklin. Now, interestingly, there was a thing at the inn where you could sort of dump off your kids, your unwanted children. You know, like in America, you just like drop them off at the fire station. Well, you actually used to be able to drop them off at the inns, and anybody who was dumped there ended up with the name Temple or Templar. All the other inns did the same thing as well, so you get people called like Grey. Well, sorry, I'm still a bit woozy with all this. He ended up being the governor of New Jersey, an appointment he held until 1776, when he was imprisoned for some reason. But then he fled to New York and came back to Britain and hung around here. Another Middle Templar, Edmund Burke. He'd been notable in his defence of American rights back in London. And as a Member of Parliament, he actually argued against excessive taxation of the colonists and warned of the reaction that would follow, claiming, "They will cast your sovereignty in your face. No body of men will be argued into slavery. The Englishman in America will feel that this is slavery. That is, legal slavery will be no compensation." And he's pretty right about that, wasn't he? But then after the British defeat, you know, it's almost like we're ignoring what happened on the 21st of August 1814, but there you go. Lots of newly independent Americans, they set up their own institutions. But, you know, there were lots of Middle Templars involved in that. They were involved in drafting the US Constitution. And arguably the motion which initiated the process, that was a guy called Charles Pinckney. He was admitted in 1773, another member of the inn. And John Dickinson, again, you know, the no taxation without representation. And John Rutledge, who later became the actual Chief Justice of the United States. They actually drafted the text. And the Constitution was actually signed by 7 Middle Templars. Then sort of like things carried on. I'll skip through all this. But I'll come to during the war, because like I say, there's always been this connection. Now, during the war, Middle Temple Library took a massive hit, courtesy of the Luftwaffe. But it was actually the American Bar Association who rebuilt it, paid to rebuild it and restocked it. And as a result, Middle Temple has the largest collection of American law books outside of the US. And like I said, we still have that connection today. I mean, we have in the inns, we have things called benchers, which are sort of the more senior members of the inn. But we also have honorary benchers. Like the Queen Mother was an honorary bencher of Middle Temple, as was Lady Diana. But traditionally also all American ambassadors end up being benchers of the inn. So that's another connection we have there. And yeah, like I say, I myself am a member of the Society of English and American Lawyers, which, as the name suggests, is just a group of people who have this sort of transatlantic connection. I'll be honest, I mainly just go along for the sort of parties. But we do have some like interesting talks and interesting meetings. But yeah, there you go. I mean, like I say, this is a bit of just a more of a waffle and a ramble than normal, because as you know, I don't normally like to use notes. I just try and remember things. But I wanted this, even more than just vaguely accurate for you. But apart from that, I hope you did in fact find it vaguely interesting and vaguely informative. And like I say, I really do appreciate all the sweet comments about me droopy face, but it is hopefully getting a little less droopy. In fact, I actually feel a lot better just having had this chat with you. So thank you.